Zlata's diary. Zlata Filipovic wrote her diary from 1991 to 1993 during the war between Bosnia and Serbia. She was living in Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia. Zlata began writing her diary when she was in the fifth grade. The war began just before her 11th birthday. Zlata's diary records her daily life and the war's increasing impact on her hometown of Sarajevo. The author of this piece is a reporter, Janine Di Giovanni, who met Zlata in 1993. Like the diary of Anne Frank, Zlata's diary contains a description of the horrors of war from an innocent child's point of view. I first heard of Zlata Filipovic in the summer of 1993 when a friend told me about a girl who was being called the Anne Frank of Sarajevo. Zlata was a 13-year-old girl who had been keeping a diary since September 1991, a few months before the war broke out. Before the war had begun, she used to lead a very happy normal life. When she began writing her diary, which she called Mimi, she had no idea that the family house outside Sarajevo would be destroyed, that her best friend would be killed while playing in a park. Life changed very quickly in the summer of 1992. Within a couple of months of Zlata's first diary entry, Serbian artillery positions were set up on the hills directly above her house. The family had to move all their possessions into the front room, which was protected from shrapnel by sandbags. Soon there were no more windows left in Zlata's flat. They were all blown out by the impact of shells. Zlata watched with disbelief as her friends and relatives tried desperately to flee before it was too late. "I'm all alone here," she wrote. Over the next few months, Zlata watched her world fall apart. Her father, a lawyer whose office was next door to their apartment, stopped working. Her mother, a chemist, began to slip into a state of gloom and despair as the family spent day after day cowering in the cellar while heavy artillery ravaged Sarajevo. The electricity was cut and the phone went dead. Food consisted of humanitarian aid packages, an occasional loaf of bread, and sometimes a tin of meat bought on the black market. There was no water to take a bath or even flush a lavatory. The only way to get water was to stand in a queue under frequent shelling. Zlata had been a diligent student, but because the Serbs often targeted schools and playgrounds, it was too dangerous to walk the few blocks to attend classes. Zlata was not allowed to go outside and play, so she had to stay in the apartment. Whenever it seemed safe, she would practice the piano, which was in her parents' bedroom, one of the more dangerous rooms. She played bash and Chopin, even while the sound of machine guns echoed from the hills. It gave her comfort to know that despite the war, her playing was improving. I met Zlata for the first time when our school temporarily restarted last autumn. A small figure with bright eyes bounded up to me enthusiastically. As we walked to her house, she talked about her life, her dreams, and her sadness. She told me about the death of Nina, a dear childhood friend. How many of your friends have died? I asked her gently. She thought for a moment. Too many to count, she replied. In October, during one of the worst days of shelling, I drove to Zlata's house to make sure that the family was all right. Her mother answered the door. She was shaking with fear. I placed my hand on Zlata's shoulder and asked, Are you all right? She looked at me gravely and said, I have to be all right. Her voice was very old and it chilled me. We sat in a bedroom and looked at their family pictures. There was one faded picture of two small children standing in a park. She stared at it and said, That's my friend Nina. We were playing in the same park that she was killed in. During the course of reporting the war in Bosnia, I met many children. All of them were traumatized and shell shocked. Zlata was different. She was suffering, but because she was recording the events taking place around her, she tended to see the world from a slightly detached viewpoint. It was almost as if she was watching a film in which she was a character. When we read her diaries, we think of desperation, of confusion, of and of innocence lost, because a child should not be seeing, should not be living with this kind of horror. Janine Di Giovanni is a reporter with vast experience in covering war and conflict. She writes about the human cost of war. She has worked in Somalia, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, and other war torn countries. She has won 4 major awards in journalism. She has won 2 Amnesty International awards for her coverage of the war in Sierra Leone and Bosnia. Jenny Di Giovanni is a contributor to the New York Times Magazine, The New Republic, The Spectator, National Geographic, and many other magazines. She frequently lectures on human rights abuse around the world.